Like, really struggling today. Like, just really. So I'm not like a historian or anything, so I don't know all of the major pandemics, but there are some pretty important ones that I think are worth mentioning. And it's actually really interesting when you look at the astrology, because there is one really important similarity or theme that pops up for pandemics, and it's that Jupiter and Pluto are always conjunct in cardinal signs when a pandemic disease starts or when it's at its prime at the moment. And so I just thought that was really interesting because when you think about it, what is Pluto? Pluto is death, transformation, it's rebirth. It just represents kind of like, just that decay. And then Jupiter is expansion. It's about, booming, things happen on a large scale. So I feel like when Jupiter conjuncts Pluto, it's like massive death, I guess. Or you could say it just means like infecting, like it's spreading death or disease everywhere. It's spreading Pluto everywhere. It's kind of like taking Pluto, because the thing about Jupiter is kind of like a balloon. It smashes Pluto into smithereens in a bunch of tiny pieces. Well, you do it like a disease or like a locust storm. Like during COVID, there were major locusts in Africa that ate all of the crops. So it wasn't just COVID, it was locusts. So I feel like that's another major theme with Pluto and Jupiter. So let's get into the exact times and dates of these interesting diseases. So I think the first disease that we should talk about, let me look at my notes here. Okay, so for the first disease we're talking about is probably the Black Plague, the Bubonic Plague, the Black Death. That was a really major pandemic that I think killed off like 1/3 of Europe. Right, so we have the Black Death. And this pandemic happened when Jupiter and Pluto both conjuncted at 17 degrees of Aries. So there we go. That's the first pandemic, and they both conjuncted in 1350. So I wasn't really sure when I was looking. I don't know, you probably shouldn't look at Wikipedia, but on Wikipedia it said the plague started around 1348 and ended in like 1352. So I looked at the middle, and that happened to be when Jupiter and Pluto were both conjunct, or maybe that's when the disease was at its prime. All right, so the next disease that I think we should talk about is we should talk about the Spanish flu, right? That was another huge pandemic that happened in 1918. And so for this one, Jupiter and Pluto were both conjunct. I should add the conjunct symbol. I think that's the conjunct symbol. I'm not really sure. At 5 degrees of Cancer. So notice we already have two cardinal signs, Aries and Cancer. Another disease that was really scary and frightening was AIDS. For AIDS, I wasn't really sure when it began. I don't think there was actually a starting point. It could have happened in 1976, where it started in the Republic of Congo, which was in Africa, I believe. The first time AIDS was seen in America was in California, and that was in 1981 and 1982, so somewhere around there. And interestingly, during 1981, Jupiter and Pluto, it's definitely in Libra. These were the degrees, 23 to 24 degrees of Libra. So that is a really poor A, but you get it. So again, another cardinal sign. We got a cardinal air sign, cardinal water sign, cardinal fire sign, and then we of course have COVID-19, Jupiter, Pluto conjunction, both at 23, 24 degrees of Capricorn, which is the cardinal earth sign. So I think that's really interesting how like four of like really major diseases happened when Jupiter and Pluto were conjunct each other. And then, of course, there were a few other diseases that I was trying to figure out. Like there was influenza, which happened, like Hong Kong influenza. It happened in 1968. Oh yeah, so let's see. That happened 2020. AIDS happened 1981. And also, interestingly, in 1981, we were going through a financial crisis. Just like in COVID-19, we were also going through a financial crisis. And I'm not really sure what Saturn was doing at the time during 1981. I think Saturn was... Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at the ephemeris, and Saturn was also hanging out. It also conjuncted Jupiter at around 15 degrees. Let me see. It conjunct... Yeah, they both conjuncted at around 4 degrees at the beginning of the year, which I find to be really, really interesting. And that's when we had a financial crisis, and that's the same. So it's like when Jupiter and Pluto are together, they're creating some kind of a pandemic or a disease or something. And then when Saturn's there, there's usually some kind of financial destruction going on, or there's really powerful authority figures taking power, which I think is really interesting, because Saturn is all about authority and structure, and then with the Spanish flu and the Black Death, I don't think Saturn was really doing anything important. Anyway, back to the Hong Kong influenza, which was 1968. 1968, there was like a lot of riots and stuff going on. That was a really intense period. I think there was a ton of planets in Virgo during 1968. There was, I think, Uranus was in Virgo, Jupiter was in Virgo, Pluto was in Virgo. Like just like Pluto, Jupiter, 23 degrees Virgo. And then there was Uranus in Virgo adding to this conjunction. And I think Saturn was also in Virgo a little bit as well. So, and, that was a really crazy year, like the hippie age, the 1960s, lots of riots. And, there was that influenza Hong Kong disease going on. And then there was another disease in February of 1956, an influenza plague in China. And Jupiter and Pluto were both 27 degrees of Leo. So influenza. Okay, so those are like some major pandemics and diseases, and I just think it's interesting how it's always Jupiter and Pluto. And what's also interesting is that 23 is like really important for some weird reason. 23, I really don't know why. Maybe because 23 is 5 in numerology, and 5 is about change. It's like, I don't know. For these, there's nothing really. I mean, that's just straight up 5. And then 17 degrees of Aries, I'm not really sure about that. But they're all cardinal signs, except for Virgo. Virgo is mutable. And then, of course, Leo is a fixed sign. So maybe fixed and mutable signs have less to do with more of like disease or like initiation of disease. Maybe something about change. Maybe with Virgo and all of the stuff in the 60s, it was about like, social change, how we deal with things. And then like, I'm not really sure about this Leo thing here, right? I mean, these two diseases right here just weren't really, I don't know. I don't think they're, here, I'll show it to you, make it a little better. I don't think they're that important, but these 4, all cardinal signs, I think that's interesting. So yeah, I was really excited when I figured this out. Well, I didn't really figure it out. I heard someone mention it on an astrology forum, and I just wanted to check it out for myself, and it was really interesting. So yeah. Okay, so considering the fact that Jupiter and Pluto are always conjunct in a cardinal sign for these major diseases, I'm going to make a prediction that we'll have another pandemic in 2070 because that's when Jupiter and Pluto will both conjunct at 2 degrees of Aries. I don't know, but it's not at like that 23 degrees, so it's not like special. Like it's just 2 degrees of Aries. So that's astrological pandemics. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making this video and kind of doing some research about it. If you have anything to add about pandemics and astrology, please leave it down in the comments. If you like the video, please give the video a like and share it with your astrology friends. And if you want to see more astrology videos in the future, please subscribe and hit the bell so you are notified. And that's it for this video. So thanks for watching. Bye.